We have Santo Karfora. He's a private consultant in human relations, character education, and diversity training for schools and businesses. He's a native of Long Island, New York. He taught social studies for 34 years, 33 years for the school district of Janesville, Wisconsin. He holds a Master's of Science degree from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. His honors include Who's Who Among America's Teachers, WEAC Humanitarian Award, Janesville WYCA Peace Award, Janesville Link Asset Builder Award, the Janesville Gazette's 50 Who Matter, the United Auto Workers Local 95 Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Service Award, and the Forward Janesville 2010 Diversity Award. He's conducted diversity workshops for students, teachers, administrators, municipalities, and businesses since 1996. He retired from the classroom in 2003 to form S&J Consulting, LLC. He and his wife, Jean, have lived in Janesville, Wisconsin since 1970. They have two daughters, Christina, who lives in Boulder, Colorado, and Sarah, who lives in Broomfield, Colorado. So with that, that's quite the MO you have there. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And I will turn it over to you. And if you have anything you need me to do, just let me know.
Thank you, Christine. I always look over my shoulder when somebody reads that bio because I'm wondering who they're talking about. I'm like, are you serious? How could that guy still be alive and still be working and liking what he does? I did share with you a little bit about what Christine mentioned, but I want to reiterate it. Spending 34 years with high school students was something that I really enjoyed. Did I enjoy it every day and every moment? Absolutely not. But like any profession, I enjoyed it most of the time. And I loved working with young people. And I probably never would have gone into this work if I stayed in New York, where I'm originally from. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised on, and Christine did a nice job saying Long Island, because that's the way most of us say Long Island. But if you're from the Midwest, they say, you talk kind of strange and different and weird. So what's really interesting to me is sometimes we never really know how our path is going to happen and where we're going to end up. So just a little bit of background on me and also a little bit about all of you. If you have a camera, please put it on because it's kind of fun for me to see who I am talking to and who I am working with. And if you have an opportunity to, thank you for putting on those cameras, I appreciate that. It's so weird to do virtual teaching when you're so used to dealing with people on a one-on-one basis and in a group. I'm the kind of guy that likes to go up and give people high fives and hugs, and we can't do that. We could just, virtually hug, and that's all good. So when I see faces come in, I've learned how to read body language a little bit through Zoom, which is really kind of weird. But at the same time, I find it really helpful. And before we started the program today, I was trying to make some sense out of the platform because I'm using a new system for myself in Zoom. And then when I was told I was going to use the WLIA Zoom account, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to try to relearn something. Well, it all works out and Jeremy's there to bail me out. So we're going to have it all work. So I want to go back to a little bit of my own background. I moved to the Midwest in 1970 after spending a year teaching on Long Island. And my wife and I got married in 1970. And when I came to Janesville, Wisconsin, some of you are familiar with Janesville, Wisconsin, down here in the southeastern corner of the state. And a lot of my teacher colleague friends of mine said to me, Santo, now remember, this was 1970, Santo, with a name like Santo, and they called me Santo, with a name like Santo, you must be Puerto Rican. And I said, no, why would you say that? Well, because with a name like that, it sounds Puerto Rican. And I'm like, no, I'm not Puerto Rican. And then someone else volunteered, then you must be Mexican because it's a Latino name. And I said, well, yeah, you're right about it being Latino, but I'm not Mexican either. And I can tell by the looks on their faces. You stop and you can read body language with faces. I can tell by the looks on their faces that not being Puerto Rican and not being Mexican was a good thing. And I was feeling rather uncomfortable in my own skin. When they learned that I'm an Italian American, I could tell I was welcomed. I could tell it was accepting. And I could also tell that not being Puerto Rican or Mexican was a relief for them. And I'm thinking, where in the world am I? What part of this planet have I gone to? This is really uncomfortable. And I remember going back home and sharing with my wife. I said, you know, honey, we were married like 5 days at that point. I'm not sure if I want to stay in Jamesburg, Wisconsin and raise a family, because these people here just seem to be really very, very judgmental. They were kind of picking on my accent. I was a Tony Jordan Joyce kind of guy. I had a really strong Brooklyn accent at that time. And, you know, that was 50 years ago. And right now, you guys probably think Tony's juggling. You guys probably think I have a strong accent. And Kelly, I see, hi, Kelly, good to see you. When Kelly was in one of my classes years ago, did I tell them that, Kelly? It was refreshing to see her at a conference a couple of years ago in Sauk County. So in the process of all of that, I remembered saying to my wife, I said, you know, to go back to New York to teach, we're going to need our master's degrees in 5 years. So why don't we go to the university, get our master's degrees, teach full time, and we will chug through whatever we need to go through, and then go back to the land of milk and honey and teach out east. So here we are 51 years later, and we are in Wisconsin. I probably never would have gone into diversity, anti-racism work, inclusion work if I was welcomed, treated like anybody else, but instead I felt excluded because of my name in the beginning. I felt uncomfortable in my own skin, and I'm like, wow. So here I am. And I stayed in the Janesville School District for 33 years. And I started doing this work with students back in 1975. And I remembered saying to my supervisor at Janesville, Craig, I said, I'd like to teach a class on African-American history. That's after I got my master's degree. And he said to me, Santo, who's going to take it? We're all white. I said, that's my point. Everyone around here seems to think if you don't look like them, talk like them, act like them, there's something wrong with you. And I said, how are we going to prepare these young people for the 21st century? How will we prepare them to leave Janesville, Sauk County, Whitewater, Wisconsin Dells, Superior, Hurley? How will we prepare them to leave these areas and go into the world if they don't know about people that don't look like them and act like them and speak like them? Okay, let's give it a shot. So back in 1977, we started teaching a class called African American History. And we taught that for, oh gosh, close to 15 years at Janesville, Craig. And I think in the process of those 15 years, most of my students were white. I may have had 2 African-American students in the process, but I would bring my students to Racine and Kenosha and to Milwaukee and to Beloit, and we would do exchanges. And the focus of all that work was all about relationship building and getting to know people, and to realize that just because a person has a different color or a different accent or a different dialect, or they part their hair a different way, that we can learn something from each other. And if we don't like somebody, that's okay. And it shouldn't be because of what they look like. Maybe basically it's because of maybe who they really are, and maybe we really don't like them. And I always tell students, you don't have to like everybody, but you don't have the right to ruin somebody's life, you know, so we kind of move on from there. So my question to you is, for starters, how many of you know, and I'm trying to think, we have 45 and I can see we got a couple of screens worth of people here. How many of you know how you got your name, how you became a Paul or a Joe or a Tony or a Tracy or an Angel or a Laurel, a Genevieve? How do you know? Do you know how you got your name? Okay, now those of you who know, I'm I'm going to ask you to unmute. Now you have to keep something in mind. My trainings are very interactive. So if you're thinking of sitting there and getting, you're in the wrong workshop. If you're thinking of sitting there and getting involved and talking and sharing, you're in the right spot. If we were in a room together and you were thinking about getting up and moving around, you'd be in the right workshop. If you were sitting there, standing and drinking your cup of coffee, I'd say, might as well go to the cafeteria because that cup's going to move over. So with all that said, we do the best we can to move you guys around as you're sitting there, sitting like I am in a chair in my office. So how did you get your name? What do you know about how you received your name? If you would unmute and share. Genevieve, I think you mentioned you know how you got your name.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I got my name because I'm named after my great aunt on my dad's side. And also my parents and grandparents had a neighbor who was named Genevieve, who they really, really liked. And they were like, we like that name. And that's how I got my name.
And it's a cool name.
Thank you. I've only met one other person with it.
So do you get nicknamed Jen or do you like Genevieve?
Genevieve, Jenna, Jen.
All right, cool. Somebody else, please. How do you know about your name? How'd you get your name?
I'll go, because mine's
right.
mine's kind of boring. My mom decided on Christine because she's just liked the name. But I didn't know if you were just talking about first name, so I'm going to give you my middle name too, which is Anne, and that's her middle name. And then last names get interesting, right? How we get our last name, if that's,
Yeah.
if it comes from our father's side of the family yeah. So that's my whole name.
All right, thank you, Christine. Somebody else, don't wait for an invitation. Angel, go ahead.
Well, my parents, they were kind of hippies, and my mom always wanted a girl. And I guess when I came out, she just said I look like an angel. So not really any affiliate to family, but.
I like that.
Aww.
All parents think their children are precious, and they
Don't.
are. And the fact that you were born looking like an angel for them, that's so true. Okay, we'll get into that's good. That's good. Somebody else.
I'll go next. I have a weird little name story there. I actually didn't know my name until I was quite a bit older than you would think. So my name is Peter Tobias Strand. I come from a big family, and they're almost all biblical names. However, as a child, they called me Toby. And so
Toby.
it wasn't until like, I want to say it was like the third grade I went to school, and they said, no, your real name is actually Peter. And I was like, no, it's not. Stop teasing me or whatever. And they're like, go home, talk to your mom. And I went home, and I found out when I was 7 years old or something, that they had been lying to me my whole life, that my real name was Peter.
Well, welcome, Toby. No, Peter. Somebody else. How you got your name?
I can go next. Mine is real simple as well. My father's name was Paul, and my mother's name was Anne, and so I'm Paula Ann.
Ooh, that's pretty cool. I like that. Nice.
Thank you.
And names. Go ahead. Who's going next?
Everyone has family names, but mine actually comes from TV, I guess. There's a show called Coach Hayden Fox, and apparently that's where my name came from.
That's pretty cool. It's really interesting because when you were going to name your children, how many of you have children or grandchildren? Raise your hands. Children or grandchildren? All right. Did many of you look at books to figure out what you were going to name your children? Some did family, some did books, whatever. And I remember when Jean and I were driving to Madison, both of our girls are adopted. And when we were driving to Madison to the social services, agency for our first daughter, we were having the conversation in the car on what we would name her. And the name had nothing to do with family as much as it had to do with names that we liked. And then when we were going up 4 years later to pick up our second daughter, we brought our first daughter into the conversation. And so between the three of us, we came up with a name that again had nothing to do with family, but had everything to do with names that we thought was, that's a cool name, let's just do that. And our second daughter, we named Sarah with an A, not Sarah with an H, because the A was the Italian spelling for Sarah. And I never knew that before. We were literally looking through books. We thought, well, yeah, we'll just give her a Sarah with an A. So sometimes there's really no rhyme or reason to how we get our names. Carmen, how'd you get your name?
Yeah, my mom always liked the name Carmen since she was a little girl. So I got the name. And I remember that we still talk about it. My grandpa at the time and others in the family didn't like the name when my mom or my parents announced it, because maybe we're not Spanish and it's more of a Spanish name, but now we always laugh about it because I think I fit my name really well, or I've grown into it, kind of a thing. So we laugh about it now, but I guess at the time it was something people grumbled about when I was named.
It's interesting how we end up looking like our names sometimes, whatever that means. And then I'm going to throw another fly into the mix. Sometimes we look like our dogs too.
Yeah.
We get a pug and we get a German Shepherd and we get a retriever, and they go, oh yeah, they look just like their dog. And I don't think anybody means that in a negative way, but there are times it's kind of like, ooh, I look like my dog. How bad is that? So Tony, where'd Tony go? Tony, how'd you get your name?
Very Dutch Italian family. So, and they decided not to name me Antone or Anthony. So they wanted to name me Tony. So so I guess it's just very Dutch Italian family, and they wanted to mix it up a little, but still within the same line of names, I guess.
Cool. So did you say Dutch Italian?
Yep.
Wow, that's kind of an interesting combination.
Yeah, my grandmother came over on the boat, and my grandfather came over on the boat. So grandmother was from Italy, and my grandfather was from Holland.
Wow, is that cool? There's a story there.
Mine has a little twist to it. This is Gail. I have a twin brother. And so they didn't know we were twins until 2 babies came out. And I actually was born first, but Glenn was on the short list for the boy, if it was a boy. And so they had to come up with a girl's name. And so Gail and Glenn, the twins, so 4 letters, same starting letter, and no family connection that I know of, but there was a little bit of we need another name.
That's as good as any. Coulter, can you share with us how you got a Coulter?
Yeah, there's all these wonderful stories of family meaningfulness, and I'm going to come back with the antithesis. So my mother worked for a long time in the dairy feed consultant industry, and she's still in ag now. And when I was incubating, pun somewhat intended, my mother was at work one day and found a magazine, some farm magazine of some sort, that featured some family trying to advertise chicken feed. And they had a kid named Coulter. And that chicken feed advertisement is where my name is from.
Whoa, chicken feed. What did
luck.
That's pretty cool, Coulter. I like that. Joe from St. Croix, how'd you get to be a Joe?
My grandmother is Josephine, so I go by Joe, but it's Joseph. So, and my daughter, actually, her middle name we named her Joe, J-O. So the Joe continues.
The Joe continues. Oh my, that's pretty cool. On my paternal side of the family, my brother is named Joe. My father is named Joe. My mother is Josephine. So when they called Joe, it's like everybody, yeah, who you got?
Right.
So I had an opportunity to be a singleton all by myself, and I was the Santo in the family. I was the Who knows? The odd duck, the ugly duckling, who calls what? But at least I had my own unique name. Tiffany, how do you get a Tiffany?
I have no idea where my name came from.
Okay. I think that's good too, because many of us just get a name, our parents pull it out of a hat, and we get married to it for the rest of our lives unless we decide to change it, which we could do. And all those things come into play, and they work well as also. Hey, Paul, how did you get to be a Paul?
My grandpa's name is Paul Kirkendall also, except I got a middle name, and my middle name is Charles, which came from my uncle apparently, who was, I don't know why, but then my dad's name is Kenneth Paul, so he got a middle name of Paul, and now my daughter's name is Charlie to go with the middle name.
You know, it's kind of cool on how some of our families make a real big deal of honoring family members by naming children after the family members, regardless of what the children look like, even if they don't look like angels. And then we have children that just kind of eventually seem to fit the name for whatever reason. And a lot of you, what you're sharing with me is just so typical of when I do this work around the country. Some are named after family, some are named after friends, some are named after Star Wars, some come after whatever, you know. I think of The Simpsons. I was named after The Simpsons because my dad was really into their program, and, you know, whatever. And it just kind of blows me away sometimes how all of that happens. And so Santo in our family, it's my maternal grandfather's name. And so interestingly enough, last week for Valentine's Day, we had a Zoom meeting with my family and extended family on both sides. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Santos at the meeting. But I am the only Santo Karfora, because all the other Santos were the firstborn, and the firstborn is named after the paternal grandfather. Okay, so they were all, but I'm the second born in my family. So I'm named after the maternal grandfather. That's how I got to be Santo Karfora. My brother is a Giuseppe, and he's named after my father's father, Giuseppe, and of course they call him Joseph. So a lot of times that becomes really ethnic, and we kind of go that route. It's kind of cool. So some people have joined us since we started. And Christine, I believe we have like 46 people at our meeting right now. And if you've just joined us, welcome. And if you want to share how you got your name before we move on, let us know. April, do you want to share anything about how you got to be in April? Were you born in May?
I was actually born in July. It's funny that you mentioned your daughters are adopted. I'm adopted as well. Cool. So I already came with a name, but my adoption was final on tax day, which is April 15th. And my dad's birthday is in April, and my parents' anniversary was in April. So yeah, they like the name April. And my middle name is Dawn. And Mom said that when they got the phone call that the adoption was final, she looked outside and there was beautiful dawn, and here I am.
Welcome. Welcome to join us. And I've got some people on the lower end of my screen. Let's see. And I have people on my second screen that don't have cameras on. So I really can't see who they are and how excited they are to talk. But Molina, how do you get a name like Merlina? Let's see, Bernardino. That sounds like a real Irish name, Molina.
That's very funny because actually it's an Italian name.
Can you come a little bit louder for me?
If you can hear me. Can you hear me now? All right, can you hear me now?
There you go.
All right. But it's funny that you're saying that because that's an Italian name.
I know. So did you get that name because it's Italian?
Well, I got a name, like you said before, somebody picked it up from a hat. And that's actually what happened.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome to our training. And I want to welcome all of you here. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go, let's see, I'm going to go back. Oh, let's see, will it work? There we go. There we go. And this, some of this is all new to me. At least some of the platform is a little bit new to me, so we're going to make it work. So today's training, and I'm not going to share my screen just yet. Today's training is on diversity, stereotyping, microaggressions, and along with microaggressions, I like to bring in what we refer to as unconscious bias. Okay, things that we don't even think about, but how they happen to fall in place. And to start out with diversity, I want to share with you a video that was a Super Bowl commercial, probably going back 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even longer, that Coca-Cola put out. And Coca-Cola had people all around the country in their native tongue sing the national anthem. And some of you might remember this, especially if you were not football fans and paid attention to the commercials, because within nanoseconds of the commercial, people jumped on social media and they were accusing Coca-Cola of being anti-American. Like, how could you have a commercial with people singing the national anthem in Russian and Spanish and Serbian and all these different, we are American and we speak English. We do not have a national tongue. We don't have a national language. So instead of backing down, like often corporate America does, Coca-Cola put together this commercial. So let me share it with you. This is their follow-up to the commercial. All right. Now, we're not selling Coke, so I don't want you to get the wrong impression. That's not our objective. But it was wonderful to see this as a follow-up to a big social media pushback when the Coke was criticized. So as you observed that particular video, what kinds of things did you see in there that represented diversity in America? As a matter of fact, why don't you throw some of the things in the chat? Let's just look at that for a minute. Okay, sometimes it's easier for us to chat than it is to us to talk. Would you throw some things in the chat that you saw in that video that represents diversity? And then I'm going to start kind of throwing that back out at you. Okay, in that video, you saw what? If someone was to say to you, okay, this session's over, and you could say, yeah, he showed a video about diversity. What did you see? What is in there about diversity in the United States? Okay, so I'm seeing things. We're coming in. Good, excellent, all right. So we've got things like in here. Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. You are functioning very well on your chat. Okay, so we've got skin color, LGBT, a wide range of ethnicities, age, language, anywhere from first generation to First Nation, immigration, accents, ethnicity, hearing people's backgrounds, different religions. I like that guy at the very end. I really get into horses, and at the very end, he said, I like to be treated good. He said, I like to be treated good. We all want to be treated good. None of us wants to be treated like we don't fit in and we don't belong. Different backgrounds, the culture, the people signifying themselves, our ethnicities, young, old, gay, a blended family, only 2 languages, people of different ethnic groups, diversity and love, diversity is broad, and diversity goes on and on and on. So you got to see a lot of things there. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. So let me ask you this. Are we a diverse country? Absolutely. Okay, that's a rhetorical question. Absolutely, we're diverse. Are we diverse because we chose to be, or are we diverse just because it worked out that way? Speak to me.
I'd say a little bit of both. A little bit of both. The founders wanted us to be able to have this place that had that where people felt like they could belong and build their dream, and so that was part of the goal, but not that it wasn't the plan to be diverse.
Okay, wasn't their plan. And I go back to that video and I think about that gal from the Middle East somewhere when she said, in America, we're not diverse because we chose to be, we're diverse because we are. But in the very beginning, when people came here from Northern Europe, I mean, they were very adversarial towards people who were not from Northern Europe. You know, if you came from Southern Europe or Eastern Europe, or if you came from Ireland, oh my gosh, you know, you are the armpit of Europe. You know, they didn't want you here. And when I look around this screen and I see all of our different faces in this training right now, there's no two of us that are alike. You know, there's diversity all around this room. There's 52 of us here right now, and no two of us are alike. There's diversity. And often when I go to do this training, someone would say to me, well, we're not diverse. And I'll say, what do you mean by that? They would say, well, we're all white. Or if I'm training somewhere else, I'll say, well, we're all Latino or we're all Black. And I will say, then why don't you bring two white people to me that are the same? Ooh. And I'd say, bring two Black people to me that are the same, or two Latino people that are the same. And then we start to get it. You could be at this training right now with your identical brother and sister, and you're not the same person. You might look identical, but you have different personalities, different likes, different dislikes, and on and on and on. So diversity is definitely more than just a thing. Okay, we are very complex people, and it's really kind of cool. So any questions or comments or additions? Can we move on? Okay, and I'm gonna figure out what's going on here. Hang on a minute. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and share my screen again. And all right. Okay. There we go. All right. So we finally got to my first slide. You know, the cute thing about sharing this with you is that as an educator in developing lesson plans and doing presentations, I've learned that I can never be married to a lesson plan, because what I really want to do is connect with my people and go from there. So what you see is what we're doing: diversity, stereotyping, microaggressions. And just what is diversity? And I have something in my logo, if we were in person now, and my logo says, diversity is the one true thing we have in common. Celebrate it every day. And again, it goes back to my comment. No two of us are alike. Whether we're white, whether we're Black, whether we're Latino, it doesn't matter. Whether we're brothers and sisters, parents, grandparents, we're all different. We may have similar aspects, but we are all unique in our own special way. So we just did the Super Bowl commercial with Coca-Cola. Now, those of you who were able to get the handouts, I know some people joined our training today and did not necessarily get the handouts earlier. Some of this stuff that I'm going to run through right now has been put in the handout package. But if you didn't get the handouts, you can kind of look off your screen. Here you have what's referred to as the Iceberg of Differences. And some of you might recall, if you go into the 60s and 70s, people looked at diversity as we're dealing with things that you could see, things that were visible, skin color, gender, physical appearance, age, race. But since the 60s and 70s, since we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated in dealing with this whole idea of diversity, we've gone into things that are much more, what word do I want to use? Just more specific. Diversity also deals with our ability to learn, how we learn, learning styles, deals with our mental health issues. It deals with our ancestry, our culture, our background, our dialect, our mental health issues. And you go on and on, our life expectancies, our preferences. And now if we're going to bring it into 2021, did we or did we not have COVID? Were we first line workers? All of those things fall into the concept of who we are as people and as a diverse people that we are. Does that make sense to all of you? Does that connect? And so diversity truly is the one true thing we have in common. I mean, you can look at this iceberg, and I'm sure you can pull things out that are unique to you. And then there are other things that are on this iceberg that you don't pay any attention to at all because it's not a significant factor. But it is what it is. Now, Oyster Lord, some of you might be familiar with some of her poetry and her works. She was a feminist, a civil rights leader, and she is acknowledging the fact that, and I think this is really interesting because Audre Lorde said, it's not our differences that divide us, but our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Often people think, if you don't look like me, act like me, talk like me, there's something wrong with you. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, what's going on there? But I want to go back to Audre Lorde's comment. It's not our inability, but often it's our refusal to recognize, accept, and celebrate differences. Think about that. Often we don't want to welcome people into our midst who are not like us. I was sitting in on a training yesterday, and the head, his name is H. Walker, and he is the diversity specialist for the Boys and Girls Club of America. And H. Walker said he's done some work with Cambridge University in London, and he said they've done brain studies, and people that get punched in the face, their brain has the same reaction or a similar reaction to people who get ignored or excluded because of their differences. Think about that, the impact that that has and how it feels. Have any of you, it's a rhetorical question, have any of you ever felt that you didn't belong? And the answer to that is absolutely. We have all been in positions where we haven't felt like we belong, where people haven't accepted what we've shared. They've listened to us and then go on to somebody else because they didn't think our input was that important. But somebody else may come up with the same thing and say, oh, that was a wonderful idea. And you're sitting there going like, am I chopped liver? And then of course we have Stephen Covey, who talks about, how many of you have heard people say, why do we waste time talking about diversity? Aren't we splitting hairs? Aren't we dividing? Aren't we causing more division than it's worth? And Stephen Covey says, no, strength lies in our differences. We are all not the same. We all are not land management people. We are all not teachers. We're all not doctors. We're all not lawyers. We're all not people that work on the roads and the canals and build bridges. We all have different abilities and capabilities, which is wonderful. But Covey says our strength lies in our differences. The fact that we're not the same, the fact that we have differences is what makes us unique and special. So I just bring that to you and I offer that to you from the standpoint of diversity is something that is wonderful. How boring would it be if everybody was a Santo? And people say to me, Santo, especially if they're churchy people, they'll say, Santo, your mom and dad must have wanted you to be a saint, because that's the Latino translation of Santo. And I go, no, they just wanted to name me after my grandfather. They maybe had high hopes, but it didn't work. So if you look at this work, some of you that ran off the information, the benefits of doing this work, it helps us understand the broad scope of diversity issues, that diversity is more than just, so what's usually the one thing people say diversity is usually about? Can anybody throw that out to me?
Usually about race.
Exactly. And often that's the elephant in the room because nobody really wants to talk about race because they feel if they bring it up, they're going to be accused of being racist. And that's just not true. But now you know, you look at the iceberg of differences, diversity includes everything and things we haven't even mentioned. To be sensitive to people that aren't like us, to be respectful of people that aren't like us. We don't have to like people to respect them. We don't have to like their lifestyle. We don't have to like their religion. We don't have to like their sexual orientation. We don't have to like their politics, but we still don't have the right to demean them or to humiliate them. And then identify with community issues, learn ways to improve our business climate. I'm thinking many of you in your work, you get out about, some of you actually get out and talk to the community and talk to people and get ideas. And some of you talk to farmers and deal with road crews, et cetera. So you're dealing with people from all different walks of life, all different socioeconomic groups, and being sensitive to the differences and where they come from. It's really so important. I remember a few months ago, I was at the post office in Janesville, and the woman in front of me, and of course we're all socially distancing and we're wearing masks, and the woman in front of me spoke fluent Spanish. I didn't have a clue with what she was saying. The guy behind the counter, I can tell, he didn't have any idea what she was saying either. But the guy from behind the counter did one of these. He said, 1 minute, 1 minute. Uno momento, he said. So he knew one thing about Spanish. And he went to the back and he came back a few minutes later with another person. And this other person spoke fluent Spanish and spoke to the woman, did the exchange and what she was there for. She smiled and left. And the other man came out and waited on me. And I said, thank you so much for treating her as well as you did. You didn't make her feel bad because she didn't speak English. And he said, I was just doing my job. And I'm like, wonderful, because that's exactly what you're doing. You were doing your job, but you didn't make her feel like she didn't fit in. And that was so cool. So to learn proactive ways to improve our business climates, develop an understanding that empowers us, and to also deal with courageous conversations. And sometimes with our people at work, we need to have a tough conversation if we're going to become culturally responsible and culturally proficient workplaces. Feel free to jump in on any questions you may have on anything like that, okay? So the basic understandings of this work: diversity is our strength. Think about how ugly it would be if everybody dealt with land management. We'd have no doctors, no lawyers, no hospital people, no on and on and on. Basic understanding, we all have prejudices. Okay, prejudice is part of the human condition. But if you're one of these writing people and you're taking notes right now, put down that prejudice is overruled, or it's overruled by knowledge and relationships. As we have relationships with people that don't look like us, it changes our prejudices if we had them about that particular individual. But knowledge and relationships help dilute our prejudices. Often they're always in the back of our mind, but our connection helps dilute them. Just to give you an example, when I was a young boy in Brooklyn, we had a big deal about turf wars. You've heard of turf wars? And in the country, it's different than it is in the city. In the city, it's you're on my block and get off of my darn block. And if you're going to be on my block, you're going to pay for it. And I'll never forget, one day my brother came home and his 2 front teeth were knocked out. And he was like 6. And I was younger than him. So I was like 4. And my brother came home and he said, the girls around the corner, they knocked my 2 front teeth out. They hit me with a skate. They hit me with a skate on my head and they knocked my teeth out. Whoa. So here I am, I'm the little brother. I go running around the corner and there are these black girls, and it seemed like there was just like a dozen of them. There were probably 4 or 5. And they laughed at me and they joked, and they made fun of me. And I said, you knocked my brother's teeth out. You did a really bad thing and I'm really angry with you. And they called me some names that I won't repeat. And they were obnoxious and they were rude. Well, those girls grew up, but at that particular point in my life, I was afraid of black girls. I thought black girls were all mean, but I began to realize as time went on that were those girls at that time, and they've probably changed too. But can I still tell you that story? Absolutely. Do I still have that prejudice? No, but it's in the back of my mind when I was 4 years old. it left an indelible mark in my heart. But knowledge and relationships helped me realize that that was just something, a place and time that I had that. So here are the things when you get together with your colleagues or your family and you need to get into some form of, we need to have a courageous conversation. These are guidelines that the first four: speak your truth. In other words, be honest about whatever the topic is you're discussing. Stay engaged in the conversation. I've learned in working with high school students and also working with people in colleges, et cetera, when we get into a topic that's uncomfortable, we want to change the topic. No, stay engaged. Too many marriages end up in divorce because they don't want to talk about the real issues until it's way too late. So stay engaged in the conversation. Be uncomfortable with it. It's okay to be uncomfortable. And matter of fact, and expect and accept non-closure, because these conversations sometimes aren't going to end right away. And so now the next 5 or so I added. When you have one of these conversations, it's between you and him, you and her, you and them. Keep it there. And it's the same thing with our training. If someone shares something in the training and it's a personal story, that's their story. It's not my story to tell. It's not my business to say, hey, I heard this from blah, blah, blah at a training. No, that would be really, really unfair. But it's your story to tell. So your stories, we keep confident. Agree to disagree. We don't come out of diversity trainings being homogenized. We come out of here with whatever works for us, whatever makes sense for us. I encourage participation. And I was doing one of these not too long ago, and someone from the group said, Santo, you don't have forgiveness. If we're going to have a courageous conversation and we're going to talk about some really, really tough stuff, sometimes we need to forgive those people that we're talking to. And they need to forgive us. And then, of course, one of my good friends that trained with me for years, who passed away, he said, we need always remember to have fun. We need to laugh at ourselves. We need to realize that we make silly mistakes. And that's probably why we have more issues in this country about the diversity issues than anything else, is because we don't know what we don't know. And the more we learn about it, the better we are at being real people. Questions, additions? Are we good? Okay. Now, in the packet of information I gave you, you have a sheet that has some things about me. Your ethnicity, where you grew up, your role in your school, workplace, when you became aware of the concept of race, how has your race or ethnicity impacted your life? What demographic changes have you observed in the community that you work in? And have those demographic changes impacted your community? So what I want to do is I want to give you a few minutes, okay, to respond to those questions, okay? And if you have that sheet that you ran off, you can fill your answers out there. If you don't have the sheet out, if you have a blank sheet of paper, just respond. Just put your answers on a blank sheet of paper that you may have, okay?
Santo, this is Christine. And I'm sure most people have seen it, but if you haven't, Carmen has posted all of your workshop materials in the chat session. So you can grab them there as well.
Okay. So Christine, did you put them in there?
Actually, Carmen did.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Carmen.
Yeah.
I was going to ask someone before we got started if that happened. And so the handouts are in the chat. Thank you, Christine, for mentioning that. And of course, you can also work off of this screen that I'm sharing. Okay, and while you're filling that out, I don't necessarily give quote unquote formal breaks, but since we're in our own environment, feel free to get up and stretch, feel free to use the facilities, feel free to go get a drink of water or a coffee. And while you're filling that out, this is a good time to take that little bit of a break if you need one, okay? And I'll come back in a few minutes and we'll discuss those.
Okay, while we take a short break, I think I'll play a message from our sponsors.
Okay. You do that, Christine. That's your turn.
Thanks.
AIRS is a nationwide team of experts representing some of the most innovative problem solvers in the A&E industry. Nationally recognized for our expertise in aerial mapping, land surveying, and GIS, we deliver efficient and intelligent solutions for your project. Tell us about your budget, schedule, and situational conditions, and we'll respond with a plan that brings exceptional value without sacrificing quality or service.
Hi, I'm John Switchenberg with Grafe. I'm the Geographic Information Systems Coordinator at Grafe.
And I'm Scott Daniel, also here with Grafe. I'm in the corporate offices in Milwaukee. We're offering infinite GIS, applying GIS to all disciplines, from municipal infrastructure to BIM, building information systems, and managing assets from top to bottom.
If you have any needs for GIS, please feel free to call Scott or I. You can find us on our website, as well as we are WLI members.
Nice.
What's the emergency? No, the fairway in Batesville. Fairway, I don't have that. Is that in Milton? 30188.
All right. I liked the way you worked that in, Christine.
Back to you, Santo.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got a question. If, can all of you see each other right now? Or are you just seeing my screen?
We can see each other. You can change that and make it gallery view if anyone needs to change their view.
Okay, so everyone can see each other. Okay. And my other question is, am I sharing I'm not sharing my screen right now, correct? Okay. And I don't need to be sharing my screen right now. So we're good. I'm opening you up. You're my gallery view right now. Okay, so let's go back to these questions. Ethnicity. Okay. And I'm going to open up the chat for a moment. Okay. So in the chat, would you write down those of you who have a single ethnic group running through your blood? like you're all German or you're all Irish or you're all Norwegian, would you write down your single ethnic group? Just to those of you that have one ethnic group running through your bloodstream, would you write that down, please? Okay, and I'm saying them German, German, German. Okay, just keep them coming. Just get into the chat. Norski, German. I've got 49 people I can hear from. I got a mutt. I got a Croatian. The mutt is not following directions. We just want single ethnic groups. Okay, so I have. Okay, so that's it. So what I'm finding is. Okay. Oh, I got more than that. All right. Okay, so I actually have about a dozen of you that have a single ethnic group running through your bloodstream, single ethnic group. And I would join that group, okay? Because I have just Italian running through my blood. It's very unusual in 2021 to be at a meeting and have at least 12 plus people at the meeting that just have a single ethnic group running through their blood. Okay, those of you that have 2, 3, or more ethnic groups running through your blood, okay, would you weigh in on that? Would you put down the ones that you have, type them into the chat? Okay, go ahead. Two more, Irish, Norwegian, this is cool, okay. Keep them coming. Polish, German, Dutch, German, German, Irish, Serbian. Half, I love this one. Half this, quarter that, Irish, German, English. And then I get I can't even begin. Okay. Okay, if I was going to ask you to come up with some kind of a statement about those of us who are in this room right now, where did most of our ancestors come from in Europe? Most of us came from Europe. What part of Europe did most of our ancestors come from? And I didn't really need you to tell me that because I could have just gone and checked the demographics out of Wisconsin and come up with those areas. So most of us came from what parts of Europe?
Germany.
Okay, so Germany, where else?
Like Eastern.
What was that one?
I would say like more like Eastern Europe.
Okay, so we have Northern Europe, Eastern Europe.
Yep.
Most of our ancestors who settled in Wisconsin, you know, you have Swiss, Norway, a lot of Northern Europeans, and then of course you get some Southern and Eastern Europeans as we move through. And most of us have more than 2 ethnic groups running through our blood as I look through the chat, right? So my question to you is, what does this say about our ancestors, okay, who have more than 1 ethnic group running through their bloodstream? I know this isn't rocket science. What did our ancestors do that helps us appreciate the diversity of our families? Like somebody wrote mutt, you know, mutt. There was the Heinz variety guy. Go ahead, Gail. Well, you're muted. We need to unmute you, Gail. Okay, you have to unmute yourself to share.
I had lost my Zoom screen. I was the one who said European mutt, so they intermingled.
They intermingled. Okay, so often first generations who came to the United States hung out with first generations, married first generations, and kept it like that. Then as you get into the second, third, fourth generation down the line, We found that there was people falling in love, not just because they were Irish or not just because they were Italian or because they were German, but because they were Emily or Joe or Jose or whoever they were. They fell in love for all the right reasons. Now, my family thought it was really important that we married Italians. Ooh, I broke the rules. I married Jean. Jean's not Italian. Jean's from Missouri. Jean's from a German English family. Nobody told me I was supposed to marry an Italian. Are you, any of you from families that have rules that they don't tell you about until you break them? Okay, well, that was my family. So here I am. I'm engaged to Jean, and I take Jean home we went to school together in Missouri. I take Jean to New York for a holiday, and my dad says to me, "You need to go visit with Grandma in Brooklyn." And I go, "Why do I need to go visit with Grandma?" He said, "Don't ask any questions, just do it." I go visit with Grandma, and Grandma says to me, "Santo, I want to know about this Jean. Is she a good Italian girl?" And I said, "Oh, Grandma, you're going to love her. She's a really good girl." But Grandma says, "That's not what I ask you. I want to know, is she a good Italian girl?" Well, Grandma got to meet Jean finally and fell in love with her. We've just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary this year. So I broke rules. I married outside my ethnic group. Many of your ancestors married outside of your ethnic group. And now we live in a day and age where many people are marrying outside of their, and in Wisconsin, I realized, oh my gosh, outside of their religious group. Catholics aren't all marrying Catholics. Lutherans aren't all marrying Lutherans. Jews, so we're mixing with religion, and that's a big deal in Wisconsin. And now we see people mixing with race. And as time goes on, we're going to be kind of an interesting, Gail, we're going to be a society of mutts or Heinz varieties. We're going to be a mix. And I hate to think that that's what we need to do to start accepting people, is to be all mixed together. You know, we should just be able to accept people for who they are. But the ethnicity is a step in the direction of starting to welcome people into the mix. So I broke rules by marrying outside of my ethnic group. My wife broke a lot of rules. She married a New Yorker. If you're from Missouri, do you know what they say about you New Yorkers? I'm not going to tell you. She married a Roman Catholic, and she broke all the rules. She married a New Yorker, she married a Roman Catholic, and she married a guy that didn't come from the Midwest, which is kind of like breaking the rules. But we survived. So I'm going to get you to another question. I'm going to ask you about when you first became aware of the concept of race. If you would just unmute and then share. Not racism now, we're talking about when did you become aware of the concept of race?
I can share one story if it's useful, Jim.
Sure.
So when I was in 6th grade, I grew up in a town, actually, the town I live in now. I mean, there was not a single black or brown kid in the entire town, quite honestly. And in 6th grade, there was a new kid coming in, middle of the school year, and his last name happened to be Black. That was his last name. And the teacher basically told us, okay, you're going to treat this kid with respect. You're going to be, you're going to do the right thing. Okay, great speech. The kid shows up and he's a white kid. The teacher made an assumption, right, that this kid was of a different color. That was the first time I really thought about or was introduced to this concept of race, because I was in a community of a bunch of white people. So that was really eye-opening. As strange as it sounds, that was really eye-opening.
Jim, why do you think that teacher assumed that that student was going to be of color?
Because of the last name. He probably just he himself probably has only known, people of color with the last name Black. I don't know why he assumed that, but that was his assumption, that he was relaying to us that he was assuming this person was a person of color. And therefore that we thought, well, okay, he must be right because he's the teacher, right?
I'll be a son of a gun. That is really cool.
That was weird.
That brings back a story when I was working with a group of students in Ozaki County. We were having what we called it a Unifest, where we brought kids together from all over the area. and we had, kids from all different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. And the fellow who was addressing the conference on Saturday morning, his name was Thomas White. And Thomas White is as black as your screen. And so Thomas White was addressing all these students, and he says, "My name is Thomas White. Are there any other whites in here?" And all of these white kids are looking at each other like a deer staring in the headlights. What is this guy saying? What are we supposed to? They didn't know what to say because they didn't want to hurt his feelings. But at the same time, he was setting them up and helping loosening them up a little bit, and it kind of helped break the ice, which was good. So, other stories. Thank you, Jim. Other stories about when you became aware of the concept of race.
I'll share. This is Kelly. I remember in kindergarten, growing up in Janesville, as you said earlier, Santo, pretty white town. There weren't very many Black children that I went to school with, but there were over time, especially in elementary school. Roosevelt, where I went, had a lot of Hmong kids. There was a large population of Hmongs that came into the area. And I remember getting to meet a couple of the kids. I think it was kindergarten, first grade. And I remember this one kid his name was last name was On. And I remember going home and I was all excited to tell my parents about, I met, a new kid, and this kid speaks like 3 different languages, I found out. And I was all excited. I thought it was really cool. He spoke 3 different languages. I don't know where he's from, but his name is On. And I said, that's his last name. Isn't that cool? It's kind of weird, but isn't that cool? And my first words on my dad's mouth were, what's his sister's name? Off. And he made a joke, and it really hurt my feelings. And I didn't know what he meant. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I kind of got the joke, but then I was like, that's my friend. He's really nice. And he speaks 3 languages. And he said, well, you be careful, because someone like that might hurt your feelings. And then I remember my mom telling me later that my dad had a little problem with anybody that wasn't white-breaded person of Catholic descent. And so, yeah, it really, and from that point on, I wanted to learn more about, this person. I wanted to be best friends with this person. And it was really heartbreaking, and yet inspiring for me to, try to break that I didn't want to be that kind of person, that I didn't want to make assumptions, even at, kindergarten or first grade.
Wow. And you go back on that, and your dad was a product of his times, just like a lot of our parents and grandparents were products of their times. But then I think it's really important not to put people in a box and say just because they're older people that they are necessarily traditional or not dynamic or not able to change. My dad, who died 10 years ago at 93, he would always say to me, Santo, what do you do when you do this work? And when I got out of college and I started teaching this class on African American history at Craig, my parents were still living in New York, and my dad said to me, I thought you went to college to learn how to teach real history. What are you teaching about Black people for? So your dad had a companion in my dad. But the amazing thing that I admired my dad for is I didn't have that conversation with my dad until I was 25. And I was out teaching, and he never raised any of us kids to look at people or to look down on any group of people. My dad would always say, there's good and bad in every group. And, and he would use the traditional treat people as you want to be treated, the old golden rule thinking. And of course, now when we do this work, we talk more about treating people the way they want to be treated, which we call the platinum rule. And the only way you know how people want to be treated is you need to have the conversation with them. So thanks for sharing that, Kelly. That kind of helped spur a memory with me as well. Anybody else? Grace, do you have a story you can share with us on when you became aware of the concept of race?
Sure. So when I was 6 or 7 in gymnastics, some of my teammates and my best friends were Black, and I don't think I was even aware that they were a different race. They were just my best friends. And it wasn't until I think like middle school that I became really uncomfortable with my last name being White. I hated saying it. I hated telling people it because I felt like I was saying I'm white. Like, and I don't know. So I've just always been uncomfortable with my last name because it is the color white.
And it's the interesting piece is a lot of people who are quote unquote not of color don't even think of themselves as being white. Like whiteness doesn't really exist in the minds of Caucasian people. They don't even give it a thought. But it's the nature of the beast. Like when I do a training on white privilege, oh my gosh, you should see some of the faces in the room. But when we're all done, they begin to realize it's okay to be white, just like it's okay to be whatever you are. But we can't blame people for what we have no control over. But we definitely have control over how we treat other people, regardless of what our skin tone is, and on and on. Anybody else, when you became aware of the concept of race?
I had a very vague notion. I too grew up in a small farming community. Everyone was white, and our nearest like big city that we only went to a few times a year or whatever for, to go to the big stores or whatever. I kind of like thought that's like Black people just lived in cities. They didn't live anywhere else because that's the only place I ever saw them. So it was just kind of this vague notion that they lived somewhere else.
Gotcha. And a lot of people that go through my training, often, at least from Wisconsin, are from rural areas, and their only sense of diversity has been black and white cows, or when they've gone to the university, they've run into people of color, and often the comment is, "Wow, they're really nice. That's really nice." And I always say, don't ever say they're really nice. He's really nice. She's really nice. When you say they're, you're putting them all in a category. But you can say they're really bad too, and that's generalizing, and causes us more trouble than it's worth. I'm going to run through just a couple of quick items. Have you noticed a lot of demographic changes in your area? I know we're all over the state. We have 72 counties that are represented here. Those of you in more rural areas, are you noticing any demographic changes from maybe 10 years ago?
Actually, I have I lived in Madison for 12 years, and I moved back to a hometown where I basically was raised. And the demographics have shifted quite a bit. So there's a university here, but I would say that now it's 20% of the population in my hometown is Hispanic. And when I was growing up, it really wasn't. I mean, I knew some, maybe it was 5% back then growing up. So the demographics have really shifted in my hometown.
That's a big piece. It's interesting. When I first moved to Janesville, there were two African-American families, the Scotts and the Davises. And that was in 1970. And here we are in 2021, and about 23% of our county is of color, and about 18% of our city and school district. And I'm like, all right, that's really neat. But when you look at the demographics of our country, they predict by 2030, 2040, about 70% of our population will be of color. Okay, which means 30% of our population will include Caucasians, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, et cetera. So I always say it's really important to learn about people who aren't like us, because people who aren't like us now are going to be in the majority in 10, 15, 20 years. So maybe we need to treat them well, so we start getting treated well for our grandkids and our great grandkids. It's the changing demographics of the times, and which is fine. It's not a problem.
But it's interesting too, because when I was younger, I grew up in Racine. And that was pretty diverse environment, but it was pretty segregated as well. I mean, there was a lot of families. I didn't really understand the concept of until I went to kindergarten. I mean, we didn't play with a lot of other diverse kids until I went to kindergarten. And then when we came in there, we all kind of came together. So it was kind of an interesting situation there too. But when I go back to Racine to see family, I see the demographics, they haven't shifted that much in that area. It's like the rural area that I came back to, that I grew up in, really shifted in demographics.
It's really interesting. And you go into those areas, those city areas, and they're very comparable to where they were years ago. But the rural areas are starting to change. Interesting. Anybody else want to share when you became aware of the concept of race? Oh, if we were in a room right now, I would have fun walking around and picking on everybody. But I can't do that here as well. Anybody in particular? Anybody?
I like Tony, grew up down in Racine, and it definitely was along the lines of when I first went to school, because my grade school was very diverse. So as soon as you went into school, you know, I didn't, but I wasn't thinking. It was much later though that I realized though, and that's an issue. I think I realized that, oh, they weren't Catholic was before I realized, oh, and you know, there's these other ethnic changes or differences.
Yeah, I noticed when I moved to the Midwest that religion was a big deal, especially between different Christian groups. And it was like, wow. But we've had okay. And a lot of you are weighing in on the chat. Thank you for doing that. So with all of that said, I am going to move forward and share my screen again, okay? And back to where we were. Okay, so we haven't done all of these, but we've done some of them. So you have a sheet in front of you on definitions. And, oh, I shouldn't say you do. Some of you do. Those of you that ran the things off that we sent to you. And the definition sheets that you have, and I don't have them on my PowerPoint. I didn't put them up there. But if you have the sheet in front of you, I want to draw some parallels, some comparisons and contrasts for you. Okay, so just shake your heads if you have the sheet in front of you. Okay, many of you do. Okay, so I put this sheet together with definitions to accompany a culturally responsive workplace. And so please keep in mind that diversity happens. Diversity, like right now, we have 40 some odd people in a diverse setting. Even if it's an awkward Zoom setting, we're all different. But as soon as we start engaging in conversation, inclusion happens. Okay, inclusion is a verb. Diversity happens. Diversity is more static. But when we start communicating, whether it's good or bad, we have inclusion. It's part of, it's developing a relationship. Okay, then the other term you have is equality and equity. Everybody wants to be treated fair under the law, equal. But when it comes to equity, you want what works for you. We don't all need the same fixes. Make sense? I'm going to show you a little video on that in just a moment. The Supreme Court ruled that schools had to desegregate, but the Supreme Court never ruled that schools had to integrate. Of course, integrate is a result of desegregating. As soon as, again, it's kind of like inclusion. Integration is an act of an effort. It's a verb. It's connecting positive or negative, but it's a form of communication. And then I want to bring you to the culture. Often I say a culture is a blueprint for living. Okay? Your culture that you have today is probably not the same culture that you had 20 years ago. And what I mean by that is you still may have the same ethnic group, the same language, the same family, but your daily routine may change. Maybe it's not even the same routine that you had 5 weeks ago. So our culture is our blueprint for living at any one time. That's our culture. But then cultural competency is when you work with a group of people, and can I have just a shake of heads or a show of hands? How many of you work with people on a regular basis? Okay. If you work with people on a regular basis, you not only want to be culturally competent, meaning know who they are, but you want to be culturally proficient, meaning you want them to continue wanting to work with you. And the only way they're going to want to work with you is if you make them feel comfortable, if you develop a relationship with them. So, like, to use a school example, cultural competency means I know my students, but I may not be culturally proficient because they may not like me. I may not have a relationship with them. Does that make sense to you? So culturally competent is, I know he's German, I know he's Irish, not that that really matters, but I just know who he is. I know what his strong points are, his weak points are. But when I'm there after school and I develop a relationship with him and he comes back or she comes back for extra assistance, now I'm developing cultural proficiency because they want to connect with me. And then, of course, you have racism. I didn't ask you in that definition about racism. I asked you about race. And racism is a term that is ugly, 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 but it's a concept. It's race prejudice plus power. Not only do I dislike you, but I want to keep you down. I want to keep you from moving up above the glass ceiling. I want to keep you in your place. Like, I may hire a few people from a different group to at least have my diversity, to have equity in my place of business, but you're not going to get any higher than, but I'm not going to tell you that. That's an example of racism. And then, of course, how many of you have ever heard of the melting pot concept? Wiggle your hands or something. Okay, as social studies people, we used to teach about melting pots all the time and realize that it's an incorrect concept. The United States is really not a melting pot where we all become blended and become one. We are more of a patch quilt or an acculturated, where we have some of us really hang on to our traditions and then some of us don't. Some of us have traditions and some of us don't. So we do what works for us. So in the United States of America, we're more of a patch quilt, and that works for us. Any questions on any of those definitions? Okay, I want to show you a equality equity video. Whoops, I got to share. Hang on just a minute.
Equity.
I wasn't sharing, was I? Okay.
Equity and equality are often confused, but these two words cannot be misused. Maybe you've said equity when you should have said equality. You've used them interchangeably, and that's as wrong can be. I'll illustrate, and then you'll see. There are 3 young boys, and one is tall, and one is in between, and one is small. They are all very good friends despite the obvious difference in their height. So in between and short and tall go out to see a game of ball. They all want to watch the game in the sense they are the same. So one is tall, and that's not all. He's big enough to see the ball. All the talking has to do is stand there and enjoy the view. The middle kid, or in between, can barely see. By this I mean that due to his mid-sized physique, he has to jump to catch a
Whoops.
peak. The smallest kid, all he can see is a fence and 2 kids much taller than he. The shortest one is left to pine for the diamond and the painted line. The question then is, does it matter if the smallest boy cannot see the batter? A solution lies conveniently in the form of boxes 1, 2, 3. 3 boxes of the same dimension, perfect for the boy's ascension. With access to the boxes equally, we give 1 box to each of the 3. So the tall boy now, who could see before, is higher now, sees even more. The middle boy can see now too, but the shorter boy still has no view. The boxes raised him higher up, but not enough to get a look. Sharing out resources equally has not allowed all 3 to see. We gave 1 box to each young boy, still the game all 3 cannot enjoy. What if we use equity to give each child enough to see? If equally does not succeed, then give out boxes based on need. So middle child, 1 box for he, that's all he needs for him to see. Tall boy, though, he does not need to have a box, that was just greed. He gives it to his smallest friend, so above the fence he can ascend. All 3 can now enjoy the game, equity, not equality, made them the same. Now think about these 3 young men and their equitable condition. Apply it to the world you see, your life and your community. What if instead of watching ball, the problem was good health for all? What if instead of being petite, you didn't have good things to eat? What if by being small meant your neighborhood had no safe park at all? It's easier to be tall when your parents are educated. The advantages are such, make you feel elevated. Equity and equality are often confused, but can no longer be misused. I know they sound quite similar, but now you are empowered with the answer. In the world of the tall, the short lose out. Use equity to work it out.
End of video. I kind of like that. It's kind of a short little ditty on explaining the difference between equity and equality. Anybody have any comments?
This is Jennifer. So I've seen that drawing before of the three kids. And there's somebody else who has redone that and called it justice, where instead of giving the boxes to the kids, you take down the fence and put up a chain link fence so nobody needs any other access because everybody can see it.
Cool. And what is the name of that video?
It wasn't a video. It was just I think I find it by Googling equality, equity, and justice.
Okay.
Just those three terms. And then from a personal standpoint, my dad was an equal opportunity specialist for HUD. And I grew up my whole life thinking I can't be racist because my dad has this job and he helps it, he helps those people, and it wasn't until I was an adult and started using my own critical thinking skills that one, using the term those people isn't good in and of itself. And that just because you are working for access for people of color to get things does not necessarily make you not a racist. A lot of what he said in the background outside of his job pointed to the fact that he was a racist, and unlearning equality and learning equity was crucial in my journey to adulthood.
Well, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Those are eye openers when they happen. They're aha moments for us, and it's like, whoa. It's kind of like the golden rule that we're so used to hearing as children, and then as you learn about the platinum rule, instead of doing what we think people should receive, maybe we should just ask them what they need and go from there. And it becomes critical. I do a lot of volunteer work for the American Red Cross, and right now we're doing virtual responses to fires and floods, and we're not there. We have no idea what their needs are. So we literally need to practice the platinum rule and find out, oh, you don't need a place to stay tonight, but you need food and clothing, or you need some things that we can anticipate, but we need to hear it from you on what you really do need. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Okay, so now if you have a pad or something to write on, I'm going to give you different groups of people, and I'm going to ask you to write down what you've heard people say, or even now what you hear people say about these groups. Okay, and you're not going to have a lot of time. This is going to be like quick action reaction. Okay, you with me? So the very first group, I'm going to ask you to write down what people say, what you've heard people say is Native Americans. So go, just quick writing. What you've heard people say about Native Americans. I'm only going to give you seconds to write. What you hear people say about Native Americans. Boom, boom, boom. Second group. What do you hear people say about African Americans? What do you hear people say about Latinx? Or as my traditional friends say, Latino, Latina, Latinx Americans. What do you hear people say about Latinx Americans? What do you hear people say about Muslims? What do you hear people say about Jewish people? What do people say about Roman Catholics? What do you hear people say about Roman Catholics? What do you hear people say about lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders, queer, questioning, plus? What do people say about white people? What do you hear people say about men? What do you hear people say about women? So you might notice that up on top, I've asked you to write down what you've heard people say. When we do this in a setting where we are actually in a room together, I actually have people walk around and write this up on big butcher block paper. And some people are very cavalier about it, and some people are very protective about it. So let me ask you this. You were in the privacy of your own home. I'm not going to ask you what you wrote, but I'm going to ask you, how did it feel writing down what you heard people say about the, and I could have added other groups, but just stopped at that number. How did it feel writing those things down? A lot of you weighed in on the chat, which is really pretty cool. I've got uncomfortable, I've got awkward. What was uncomfortable or awkward about it for those of you?
I feel like most of what I wrote was like negative. I realized that partway through, like everything I wrote that I had heard was like kind of negative.
Okay, and I didn't tell you to write what bad things you heard, correct?
Yeah, you did not tell us to write that. That was just kind of the direction I went, and I feel bad about that kind of.
No, and don't feel bad about it, but that is, okay, this is something that's in our, we just responded to an unconscious bias. Would that make sense, Angel? And you're not alone. Like I'm thinking, if I look at, I want to ask you a question. Can you see each other right now, or can you just see my screen?
I've got it on gallery view.
You can see what? Can you see each other on just my screen?
If you put it in gallery view, you can see everyone. Otherwise, if you have speaker view, it's usually then just you.
Okay, because you're in
Santo?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to go back to the LGBTQ. And I sent you a message privately, but I think that this is something that needs to be corrected to everybody in the room.
Go ahead.
The term transgenders and transgendered are both offensive terms towards the transgender community. The correct term is transgender people.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification,
You're welcome.
because it's an important clarification.
That's the only reason I interrupted. I
No,
am the
no, no.
I am
No,
the
no,
mother of a trans kid, so I'm very cautious when I listen to those things.
And I appreciate you bringing that up. Matter of fact, just last week, my wife and I attended an event with the LGBT Center in Racine. And I have a lot of respect for that. So thank you for bringing that up. Other people, other comments, how it felt doing the writing. Okay, so let me bring this up. When you were writing what you heard people say about these groups, what were you taking away from people in those groups? Like, I not ask you to tell me what you wrote. And Angel, you shared the fact, and you had a lot of company where a lot of people were writing negative things. We could also find some positive things. But even if, okay, good. Thank you, Sally. Taking away their humanity, you were taking away each person's individuality. Because just because I may be a Muslim, Muslims aren't all the same any more than Roman Catholics are all the same, or all Native Americans are the same. So we've put them all in a category and we've taken away their individuality. Yes, I may be an Italian American, but I'm not like all Italian Americans. I'm like me. You're like you. And the uniqueness of that makes us who we are. And when we stereotype, often our unconscious bias kicks in and we put them in a group and we talk about, Jennifer, as you mentioned, those people. And when we start talking about those people, and I'm glad that you said, whoops, and I don't like to use, I kind of get caught up in those people. I was like cringing, like, and you brought up how uncomfortable that is because we put people in a box.
Yeah, I don't typically say that, but since we were talking about how I was my thought process as a kid, that it was an important distinction to make.
Oh, absolutely. So with that said, do you guys watch America Has Talent? Some of you do. Some British Has Talent. Now here's a nice follow-up to putting people in boxes and imposing our impressions on them. So let's get this started here. Wow, kind of a heartwarming video, isn't it? And Kelly, thanks for your post on that. But I agree, you have to accept and my wife and I have this conversation on a regular basis. What you see is not what you get. They judged her, they evaluated her before she ever started singing. They just decided that she fit in some kind of a box. She looked like one of those people, whatever that meant. And then she just knocked their socks off. And it becomes so heartwarming when people start to realize that we don't fit into the box. So with that said, unless you have some comments, I'm going to move forward. Anything else? Any comments? Melina, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, I put it in the chat. It seems that other people had the same reaction. So I want to highlight for maybe those that are not reading it, that unfortunately, you have to be really exceptional to be accepted and overcome what people are seeing. And oftentimes, people are just good enough. That's not enough to have people overcoming what they still see and they want to still see. So it was a wonderful performance. I loved it, but we have to keep in mind that those are unique, and most of us are facing just being like everybody else and not being accepted just because the look is different or the way you speak is different. That's all I
Melina,
want to know.
your comment touches my heart, because we all can't be exceptional in what we do. And sometimes people look at us if we have an accent, if we have a different skin pigmentation. And it's like, if we're not, I'm going to use a term that most of you are familiar with. If you're not a Jackie Robinson or a Sammy Sosa, you're just ordinary. No, ordinary people do amazing things, and you don't have to do amazing things to be accepted. So your point is well taken, Melina. Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments? Okay, I'm gonna move forward. And we're gonna do an activity called Here We Come. And if you run off the sheets, you've got these questions in front of you. You're gonna see pictures of 3 people. And you're only gonna have split seconds to evaluate. And so just kind of respond to the questions. I think you have A, B, C, and D in your sheets. You can have picture 1, picture 2, and picture 3. And what is your first impression? How is this person different? How is this person similar to you? And how does this person make you feel? Okay, you ready? Got your sheets? Ready to go? First person. Okay, do a quick response. What is your first impression? How is this person different from you? Similar to you? How does this person make you feel? Just quick responses, just. Even the voice recognition cannot find a. I love it. I found something to overcome voice recognition. Yay! It picks up my Brooklyn, but not my. Second person, you ready? First impression. How is he different from you? How is he similar to you? How does he make you feel? And the thing I wanted to precede this by saying, you're walking down the street and you run into these people in Racine, in Kenosha, in Milwaukee, in Dallas, San Francisco, Atlanta. And then the third person you're going to see is this person. What is your first impression? How is he different from you? How is he similar to you? And how does he make you feel? I love some of you. Some of your comments in the chat are fantastic, just precious. Okay, so we're going to go back to the first person. Okay, this lady or this person. Now, instead of you giving me your answers to those questions, would you give me some adjectives to describe her? And unmute yourselves, or you could put them in the chat, just some adjectives. So I have tired. Speak to me or put them in the chat. Sad, seasoned, wise,
lonely,
weathered, tender. I love it. Tender. Lots of stories. Beautiful. Humble. Loving. Think of the diversity we're getting. Just ask you one question. I said, what are the adjectives that you can use to describe this person? What did some of you write down? Anybody have anything in common with her? Anything in common? Tired, old, gray, female. She's a woman. Okay. In the interest of time, would you like to meet her? Let's find out who she is. She's a Lakota Sioux Indian. Her name is Doris Leader Charge. She's an expert and teaches language and history of Native Americans at Sinte College in South Dakota. And Kevin Costner actually hired her to do translations for Dances with Wolves back in the 1980s. Doris Leader Charge. Okay, let's go to the second person. Second person. Number 2, give me some adjectives to describe him. Okay, put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Strong, black bull, young, athletic, stylish, intense, confident, anybody want to unmute? Focused. Anybody have anything in common with him? If you're healthy, cool. Anything else? Similar in age range. How does he make you feel? Weigh in on the chat. How does he make you feel? Good, I love it. Protected, small, ooh, small, good, protected, small. How about if we meet him? All right. His name is Robert Murphy. He's a financial analyst on Wall Street. At least he was. He graduated in the top of his class at Harvard. And we're convinced this is dressed down Saturday, or maybe dressed down Friday after you got home from work. And he, at the time we took these photos, he worked at Dillon and Reed in Manhattan. Okay, that's Robert J. Murphy. And then our third slide was this person. Okay, number 3. How about some adjectives for number 3? Cavalier, ooh. Carefree, grudge, oh, grungy, cocky, cheeky, commercial actor posing, happy, relaxed, thinks so, kind of stuck up on himself. All right, it goes along with the cocky. Travolting, is that like John Travolta? Arrogant, wow. So does anybody have anything in common with him? Dare you have anything in common with him after these adjectives? Hair, thank you. You guys are stretching, I love it. Long hair, anything else? Anything else in common with him? Nobody wants to admit it. Gee, white, okay. Human, thank you, Jeremiah. Boy, he has the look. Hairy legs. All right. I'm not touching that one. Okay, let's meet him. His name is Mitch Longley. He's an actor, model, and a paraplegic. He's the president of the Spirit of the Wounded Horse. It's a nonprofit organization that helps underprivileged, disabled people around the world. So, point of information. This activity has nothing to do with any of these people, but it has everything to do with our own preconceived notions on what they look like, not knowing them and not knowing anything about them. Kind of like Susan Boyle in Britain's Got Talent. Everybody kind of laughed at her, and then she opened up her mouth, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, she really was pretty amazing. And now we looked at these three people, and we could come up with adjectives. We could tell you what we have in common with them, how they're different than we are, not knowing anything about them. But often when our biases get in the way of getting to know people, we miss an opportunity. We miss an opportunity to really get to know who these people are. And like, we'll look at this guy here. When we're doing this training in person and we're not doing it virtually, often people laugh at him when they see that first picture of him. And then when they learn that he's a paraplegic, all of a sudden it's kind of like, ooh, I felt really bad. And it's not a matter about making people feel bad as much as it's a matter of realizing we all have a tendency, it's kind of a human nature, to kind of evaluate people before we ever get to know them. Like when we got together this morning, we have a tendency to evaluate people as they come into the room. You made a decision on your presenter before he opened up his mouth. Whether you were right or not, it doesn't matter. But we have a tendency to evaluate. And it's human nature to do that. But again, relationships and knowledge help us dilute any biases. And we need to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. So here's an example. Denmark put a great video out that deals with putting people in boxes. More that brings us together than we think. Pretty powerful. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Okay. So tell me, what was your reaction to that video? Anybody have any reactions?
Well, if you can't see, I'm wiping my eyes, crying.
Oh, it is powerful. And I love it. They do this particular one, and then there's another one comparable to it where they work with just children. And what I love about it is it focuses in on that we have so much in common. And we have a tendency sometimes to put people in boxes, which takes away their individuality. It takes away who they really are. And until we get to know them, we're missing opportunities. And I guess that's what I see from it. Anybody else have any questions or comments you want to make, or weigh in on the chat on that one? The house can have beautiful interior with brand new appliances, but if the exterior facade is ugly, absolutely. Thank you, Thomas.
I want to make a comment, Santo.
Go ahead.
This is Milena speaking. So I want to highlight two things. One is we sometimes put ourselves in a box because we need a sense of belonging in a crowd. And so we look for being in a box. Mm-hmm. So this is a part of a human nature. We are not individual in itself. We are part of a social group. Whatever that social group is going to be, depending on the day, depending on the lifespan position you're at. But what is interesting is when people put you in a box, is also in itself a way to identify who is around you. And so you need to put others in a box to see if you can trust or not. What is bad, in my opinion, is when you start to rank those boxes. My box is better than yours. That's really bad. Not the boxing in itself, is the ranking of the box. And I think we see this one in this country a lot. I think this is the part that we need to maybe pay more attention to.
Thank you so much. And we have a tendency to create a pecking order about which box is more value or which is more, has more status, to use a term that I hate to use. But your comments remind me a lot of my nephew's wife, who's from Serbia. And she's been in this country probably 20 years, but she has similar kinds of thoughts about how people in the United States judge people before they ever get to know them. And thank you. Excellent comments. Anybody else? Are we all good? All right. I'm going to move forward, move on. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So let me ask you this, because this is my first time that I'm actually using a split screen and a double screen. When I share my screen, okay, do you see each other or not? No? Do you see me when I share my screen? You do, but you don't see each other. Okay, I was just kind of wondering. Thanks for clarifying my technological shortcomings. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. And we're gonna look at the second or the third piece of this training, and that's microaggressions. And it's a term that many of us have heard of. And then, of course, some of us have never heard of microaggressions. These tiny little subtle things that we do sometimes that offend other people. And then and we don't even realize it's happening. So a microaggression, the idea that specific interactions between those of different cultures or genders can be interpreted as non-physical forms of aggression. You know, when we make these comments about quote unquote, those people, we make comments about, we say to individuals like, you're a credit to your race. You know, we're trying to give them a compliment sometimes, but instead it ends up becoming a put down. Microaggressions can also be a result of our unconscious biases. Our unconscious biases sometimes take over when we start to deal with people who we don't really know very well. So what I'm going to be sharing with you are some examples of microaggressions. But before I show you the examples, I'm going to ask you to give me some. The most detrimental forms of microaggressions are usually delivered by well-intentioned people like you and me, who are unaware that they've engaged in any harmful conduct at all. We didn't even realize that we hurt somebody's feelings. So can you think of, without giving me specific names or anything like that, of situations where you may have witnessed or been a victim of microaggressions or a product of them? That's a tough one. It's a tough question to throw out, but it's also a tough one to kind of think about. I could share with you a little story. Teaching at Craig High School for 30 some odd years, on Sunday afternoons, for many of those years, we used to meet at the gym, quite a few teachers from a couple of different schools, and we would play basketball. Well, you don't know me. You don't know that I'm a 6'5", strong, excellent basketball player, do they, Kelly? They don't know that. But I'm not 6'5", and I'm not a basketball player, but I love to play basketball. So we'd get together on Sunday afternoons, and I was usually one of the last ones to get chosen. Okay, nobody meant to hurt my feelings. But let me ask you, did it hurt my feelings? What do you think? Yeah, I felt really like left out a lot of the times. Oh, who gets Carfora today? And after we played enough, you know, my ability really had nothing to do with it, but it was just the feeling that I had when we get together with people that didn't know me, you know, because, you know, the line went this way and then I was there and everybody else. So the tall guys got picked first and then the rest of us got picked. And it was always kind of a humiliating feeling. And I don't think people that do microaggressions really mean them to be. Okay, so we're in the chat. boss that thought I needed to improve my communication skills. He handed me a book and said, here's a book on communication written by women. Ooh, thank you, Jennifer. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. There's lots of quote unquote gender issues. There's all kinds of things that are out there that hurt our feelings, especially, you know, I got a million of them. So this guy sounds like a real winner or something like that. So let me show you some examples. And I want you to focus on the intent of the microaggression. Okay, the person doesn't mean to hurt anybody, but I want you to focus on the impact, okay? So here's gonna be, and I have these people together in groups. Okay, there's my first group. Okay, so, and I want you to feel free to unmute or to go into the chat. Okay, the woman on our left, what are you? Human. So like, what are you to him? What do you think the impact has on those two people?
It turns them into objects rather than people.
Thank you. What are you? What do you mean, what am I? I'm a human being. I'm a person. I'm a dad. I'm a variety of things, but what am I? Thank you. It dehumanizes them. So, impact. You don't look like a normal Black person, you know? Why do you sound white? A lot of these are racial. So what do you guys speak in Japan? Asian? Look at the lady in the middle. Why do you sound white? How do you think that would make you feel if that were you? What does white sound like? So there's a friend of mine who is actually the CEO of an organization in the county. But before he became CEO, he was a development person for this organization. And he made arrangements to meet with a donor. The donor picked the place and the location. So they were going to meet at a restaurant in Lake Geneva. And my friend shows up for lunch at this restaurant. And the fellow that he's going to meet turned to my friend and said, "You tricked me." And my friend was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You did not sound Black on the phone." I mean, the fact that anybody even would say that to another human being kind of reminds you of that boss that had obviously these terrible communication skills. But he said that to my friend, and my friend at that time, he was just totally blown away. Like, how in the world can you say that? Next one. Person on the right. Can you see as much as white people, because of your eyes? I mean, the intent, the impact. Angel, what are you thinking?
That it's extremely offensive.
Big time, big time. And then there's Courtney. Courtney, I never see you as a Black girl. How many of you have heard people say, "I don't see color"? Yes? What are they trying to accomplish by saying that?
Put everybody as the same. They're not recognizing their individuality.
Okay, but that's not why they say, "I don't see color."
They're trying to say they don't have prejudice.
Yeah, they want to come across that they don't have any biases, they don't have any prejudice, they say, "I don't see color." Well, if you're a person of color, of course you want them to see you, and you want them to see you for who you are. And if you're of color, if you're not of color, you want them to see you that way as well. So it's very, very, what word do I want to use? Humiliating to think that someone would say, "I don't see color." Their intention is to be non-biased, but the impact comes across very negative to people of color. I'm just going to run through some of these really quickly. this gal here in the middle, this gal on the right. When people think it's weird that I listen to Carrie Underwood, you know, again, we're putting people in our own little frame of work, our own little box. So what does your hair look like today? And often, and it's really frustrating, often people of color have people that will come up to them and touch their skin or want to stroke their hair and treat them like objects or not even ask their permission. And truly a microaggression. And this young man here on the right, the limited representation of my race in your classroom does not make me the voice of all Black people. No one speaks for his group or her group, whether it's Black or Native, of Italian or German or Swiss. We're just all individuals. We're all in this world trying to make sense out of it. So here's somebody's trying to say to her, so you're Chinese, right? I'm trying to figure out what she is. Well, she may not know. You know, and one of the things when we did our ethnic group earlier, we really didn't bring in the fact that many of us, not many of us, but well, there are many of us in the United States that really don't know our ancestry. We don't know our background. We may be adopted. We may be in foster families, you know, et cetera. And so you're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl. What a put down. You know, I'll just let them speak for themselves. So I want to read this to you. I have come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the workplace. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As an employee, employer, I possess a tremendous power to make a person's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor. I can hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated and a person humanized or dehumanized. And I want to just kind of bring in the fact that I like to initially do this particular training was on awareness, understanding, sensitivity, not treating everyone the same, giving people their equitable place in the world, getting to know individuals, not passing judgment. And that's not to say you do. I think a lot of you are probably in very good positions, very, very good places. But I want to thank you for taking this workshop and for valuing the whole idea of diversity, stereotyping, and the idea of trying not to do microaggressions. And sometimes we just need to be sensitive to them in order not to do them. And I want to thank Kelly for bringing my work to the forefront so I can present at this conference. And I want to thank all of you for being part of it and for participating. And Christine gave me like a 2-minute warning 5 minutes ago. No, I'm only kidding. So with that said,
friend.
I'm going to move her out. I want to thank you for being such a good group. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a minute. And in the packet that we sent you, there is an evaluation that we'd like you to fill out. And I don't know if you send them to Carmen or Christine or whoever you send them to, but send them to whoever you send them to, and then I will get a chance to get some feedback from you. So thank you for your input, for your participation, and for wanting to make a difference in the lives of the people you work with every day and your families. Any other parting comments you want to make?
No, I wanted to thank you, Santo, so much for presenting, and we hope to get you back at another conference if we can make that possible, because I know you have other workshops that you can provide to this group. And as I saw a couple notes about sharing the presentation, and I think we can do that for those who are attending to make that presentation available for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And this is being recorded, so
Yep.
I'm sure WLIA will have that available for you guys. Fantastic.
Definitely.
Thank you for your input. Oh my gosh, we're almost at the witching hour, aren't we? I believe my colleague, she's coming in to do the next session, Eva, and Eva might even be here.
She's here.
She is
All
here.
right. All right.
I would like to echo what Kelly said and just thank you again for coming. And, you know, we get together once a year for this annual conference, and We have all sorts of speakers and workshops, but I always really enjoy the ones that are not necessarily technical in nature, but still very, very important to come and receive this type of training and have these conversations. So this was really enjoyable.
Thank you, Christine. You say technical. I was doing a training like this a couple of years ago in Madison, and I made the comment in the training. I said, "Well, this isn't rocket science." And one of the guys in the training said to me, "Well, I teach rocket science," and I said, "I don't. I work with people." So, so I am going to leave this meeting and turn it over to Eva, and wish you well and have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.